The Hanford site was a nuclear production complex established in 1943 as part of the Manhattan Project in South Central Washington. The site was home to the first full-scale plutonium production reactor in the world. Plutonium that was used in the first nuclear bomb test, atomic bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, and many Cold War weapons developed in the Hanford site. Today most of reactors are decommissioned, but the site is still one of, if not the most radioactive places in the West. The plutonium separation process resulted in the release of radioactive isotopes into the air, which were carried by the wind throughout southeastern Washington and into parts of Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and British Columbia. The nuclear reactors of the site needed a huge volume of water to cool the heat produced by the reactors. Pump systems diverted 75,000 gallons of water per minute from the Columbia River. This water later was held in large tanks known as retention bases for up to 6 hours and then returned to the river. But some chemical elements weren't affected by this retention, and radioactivity leaked into the river. And this continues today. Because the site is one of the first, much of the nuclear waste was mismanaged and improperly disposed of, and the cleanup process is way too costly. Hanford holds 56 million gallons of radioactive waste, which still leaks into the soil and the river because many tanks have never been replaced. Altogether, these tanks contain twice the radioactivity of what was released during the 1986 nuclear incident in USSR. A big concern is that the hydrogen buildup inside one of the tanks could lead to an explosion. Some nuclear experts have said it is an underground Chernobyl waiting to happen. The Soviet-US nuclear arms race during Cold War hit a step in the northeast Kazakhstan the worst. The Semipalatinsk test site, also known as the Polygon, was chosen by the notorious Lavrenti Beria, the political head of the Soviet atomic bomb project, as the primary testing venue for the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons. The land was perfect for military and nuclear scientists, flat steps, access to the river, and construction material like wood, sand, and stone, also away from major cities and far from major transportation hubs. But there was a problem. The land was falsely claimed uninhabited by Beria. From 1949 until 1989, in total, more than 400 nuclear tests, including underground and atmospheric tests, were conducted at the facilities. The residents of a relatively large city, Semipalatinsk, and especially the locals in rural settlements close to the testing site, suffered first-hand horrors of nuclear tests. The impact of nuclear tests on people was both immediate with injuries and disruption during the tests, and long-term when serious health issues started manifesting themselves. Nobody gave any thought that the radioactive fallout from such powerful explosion will spread beyond the testing site. In a rush, Soviet scientists made calculations about the fallout. They concluded that everyone within the zone where radiation could exceed 200 Röntgen had to be evacuated. Following the collapse of Soviet Union, newly independent Kazakhstan inherited the site. Russian scientists and security personnel quickly departed without leaving information for the Kazakh authorities about the location of many tunnels or boreholes. Today, even though Kazakh scientists have been conducting decontamination procedures for almost 30 years, radiation levels here are still elevated, and children in the area continue to be born with genetic mutations. On Saturday, 26 April 1986, a safety test at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant led to the worst nuclear disaster of human history. The test was a simulation of an electrical power outage to aid the development of a safety procedure for maintaining reactor cooling water circulation until the backup electrical generators could provide power. But during the planned decrease of reactor power in preparation for the electrical test, the power unexpectedly dropped to a near-zero level. The operators were able to only partially restore the specified test power, which put the reactor in a potentially unstable condition. This risk was not made evident in the operating instructions, so the operators proceeded with the electrical test. Upon test completion, the operators triggered a reactor shutdown, but a combination of unstable conditions and reactor design flaws caused an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction instead. A large amount of energy was suddenly released, vaporizing superheated cooling water and rupturing the reactor core in a highly destructive steam explosion. When reactor 4 at the plant suffered the catastrophic meltdown, the uranium core reached temperatures in excess of 1600 Celsius. The vessel was so hot that the zirconium cladding separating the fuel from the coolant fluid began to melt, and combined with uranium, steel, concrete, and sand present, to form a radioactive glass-like lava. Over time, the lava melted through the base of the reactor vessel and several floors of the building before eventually coming to rest in the basement where it cooled and solidified. It wasn't until December 1986 that members of the cleanup crew discovered an offshoot of the radioactive mass that has subsequently come to be called the elephant's foot. Despite being only a small part of the roughly 100 tons of lava created during the meltdown, the elephant's foot has become the symbolic of horrifying legacy of Chernobyl, largely due to its intense radioactivity. Radioactivity in the basement that the elephant's foot was in, approximately 8,000 Röntgen, which makes it probably the most radioactive place of Earth. Being near the mass will kill a human within 5 minutes. 10 years later, the elephant foot was visited by the deputy director of the Ning Confinement Project, Arthur Korneev, who took photographs using an automatic camera and a flashlight to illuminate the otherwise dark room. Today, elephant's foot not as radioactive as in the 1986, but it's still deadly. 2011 Tohoku earthquake that hit the East Japan was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in the island, and the fourth most powerful earthquake in the world since 1900s. It was a devastating event in which more than 15,000 people lost their lives, and the whole world watched it live without being able to do anything. This event also led to the second worst nuclear meltdown since the Chernobyl, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. In March 11, on detecting the earthquake, the active reactors of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant automatically shut down their normal power-generating fission reactions. Because of these shutdowns and other electrical grid supply problems, the reactor's electricity supplies failed, and their emergency diesel generators automatically started. Critically, these were required to provide electrical power to the pumps that circulated coolant through the reactor's cores. This continued circulation is vital in order to remove residual decay heat, which continues to be produced after fission has ceased. However, the earthquake had also generated a mega tsunami 46 feet high that arrived shortly afterwards and swept over the plant's seawall that was built for maximum 18 feet high tsunamis and then flooded the lower parts of the reactors 1 to 4. This caused the failure of emergency generators and loss of power to the circulating pumps. The resultant loss of reactor core cooling led to the 3 nuclear meltdowns, 3 hydrogen explosions, and the release of radioactive contamination in units 1, 2, and 3. More than 1,500,000 residents evacuated from the communities surrounding the plant. The incident was classified as Level 7 on the International Nuclear Event Scale, joining Chernobyl as the only other accident to receive such classification. The plant was shut down in 2011, but decommissioning is likely to take 40 years, and the cleanup is still ongoing. After atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, USA became the absolute power when it comes to nuclear science. Soviet Union's response was the Mayak plant, built in total secrecy between 1946 and 1948, the first reactor to create plutonium for the Soviet atomic bomb project. Lake Kızıltaş provided the water for cooling system and rapidly contaminated. Lake Karachay, on the other hand, was way too small to provide water, so it was used as a dumping ground for large quantities of high-level radioactive waste, too heated to store in the facility's underground storage vats. The original plan was to use the lake to store highly radioactive material until it could be returned to the Mayak facility's underground concrete storage vats. But this was proved impossible due to the lethal levels of radioactivity. The lake was used for this purpose until the Kishtim disaster in 1957, which was the second worst nuclear incident after Chernobyl when it comes to released radioactivity. After the incident, the radioactive waste spread out to various dumping places for safety. But Lake Karachay is still the most radioactive open-air place on Earth. The sediment of the lake bed is estimated to be composed almost entirely of high-level radioactive waste deposits to a depth of roughly 11 feet. Just being near the Lake Karachay for 30 minutes would kill a human from acute radiation sickness.